and welcome to 10%. You know, there are certain people who have made a name for themselves in theater, literature, all forms of the arts. And today we have one of those newsmakers, Jake Heggie, contemporary opera composer, and now a cover boy. What do you think of that? What is this about?
What are the odds? Huh?
I mean, did you ever think that you'd be a cover boy? It's a great picture,
No,
by the way.
Thank you very much. No, I mean, working in American opera, in the arts, I mean, you never expect that, especially the way the world is changing so quickly with print media and things like that. So to put an American opera composer on the cover of a magazine, even if it is Classical Singer magazine, so it's all about singers, it's a great honor. I'm just really thrilled that the music has actually reached people on that level so that they're interested in the story behind the music, and I'm very proud to tell that story too. Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard your name. It was 3 years after I left the place we both were employed briefly. I was at San Francisco Opera in the marketing department, and 3 years later you took a job at San Francisco Opera in the public relations department.
I did.
So how did we get this international career as a composer out of that? How are the two connected? Were they?
It's a kind of a miracle. It's a total Cinderella story because I had been living in Los Angeles and I injured my right hand, so I couldn't play the piano anymore, and I stopped writing music too. I had been writing music and performing as a career up until then, and I got into a very dark space, but I found out I could write really well about music, and I had great perspective that a lot of writers in the business didn't have. And I moved to San Francisco in 1993 to sort of start over, and also to find out if in this great city, if I'm meant to be in music, or am I meant to be adjacent to music? And I got the job at the opera. Elena Park, who's now at the Met, hired me, and Lotfi Mansouri was the general director, and he was very generous to me. And I wrote, and what I didn't realize was I was getting the best education you could imagine.
I mean, I've always said working at San Francisco Opera is like, boy, you're thrown into the frying pan of arts and culture and music in San Francisco.
What was great was I didn't know I was an opera composer at that time. I knew I was a composer, but I thought maybe that part of my life was over. But I was getting this education by living in the theater. You know, with PR, you basically live there. Yes. So, and interviewing the chorus, the orchestra, the conductors, the directors, the designers, the singers, the administration, the front of house people, everybody, and getting a sense of how it all worked. And then being so inspired by our mutual friend, Frederica von Stade.
Well, I was going to say, is that where you met Flicka?
It's where I had met her a couple years earlier, but we really cemented our friendship. She was doing the world premiere of Conrad Sousa's The Dangerous Liaisons that year in '94. And she just became a friend and a real supporter. And I was so inspired by hearing her sing. That cast had Renee Fleming, Frederica von Stade, Thomas Hampson. It was kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, I know, gasp and swoon.
Yeah, and so she became a friend, and I decided to write again. She really inspired me, and so I wrote some folk song arrangements, and I gave them to her. She looked at me with a little bit of terror in her eyes and said, "What are these?" And I said, "Well, in another life, I was a composer, and you really inspired me, so I'd love to
So Frederica von Stade was your muse?
Yeah, and still is to this day.
Yeah, I know that reputation of opera singers being not nice people or difficult to deal with.
No.
It's not her. I remember doing a brief PR stint at San Francisco Opera. I think it was summer of 2005, and I think it was Così fan tutte. I could be wrong, but during when she was off stage, she was walking her dog around the opera house in costume, and I thought, how non-pretentious can you be?
She's very grounded, and she's been a real role model for me, and a mentor, and a champion, and a friend on every level about how to live your life, about how to prioritize things in your life. And she's inspired so much work from me. But I gave her those songs, and that was the beginning of becoming a composer again. And she championed them, Renee Fleming, and then out of the blue, Lotfi one day asked me if I'd ever thought of writing an opera.
And that was the birth of
Dead Man Walking. He sent me to New York to meet Terrence McNally to see if we would like to collaborate, and about a year later...
Had you met Terrence McNally before?
I had never met him. I had been a huge fan. That was a big, big deal.
Yeah, I would be scared to death.
I was nervous, but I thought, what have I got to lose? I was 35 years old, and it was the opportunity of a lifetime. It's like you wait in your life for someone who believes in you and opens a door, and says, here, I believe in you, and I think you would be great doing this. I never could have imagined. And what a career track, going from the writer in the PR department to being the first composer in residence at San Francisco.
Well, and that was, I mean, it was kind of, I mean, you know, there's no such thing as overnight success. It was many, many nights.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember when Dead Man Walking premiered, it was like Jake Heggie, Jake Heggie, Jake Heggie everywhere. What did that do to your personal life?
Well, I have to say, I've always been basically a very private, grounded person. And it didn't do much to my personal life in the sense that I had more appreciation for everything, I think, because I realized how rare that was and what an opportunity. But it really, my professional life changed immensely because it was so widely publicized and so successful at the first outing that it started to move all over the world. And that opened a lot of doors for me professionally. And I've made my living as a composer for 13 years
Well, I mean,
now.
knock wood.
Yes, every day,
Yeah.
several times.
Well, I mean, is it scary having a success that big right out of the box? People are like, so what's next, Jake?
You know, is it scary? It was wonderful because it opened all those doors. Then I did feel the pressure. I made a huge mistake after Dead Man Walking opened. I read every single review. And
You don't do that. I always tell my clients, no.
Talk about learning a lesson.
Don't ever do that.
And now I have a wonderful husband, Kurt Branham, who reads everything for me. And then I think it's important to know they all matter. It matters a lot. But it's not important for me to read them because that language becomes ingrained in the front of my head. And then I'm not writing honestly because I'm aware of voices, you know, other voices instead of just the characters or the story that I'm trying to write. So Kurt will read them to me, you know, for me, and tell me if they're good or bad, because I need to know. And I also need to know if there's a specific area that they're all focused on that is not working.
Yeah.
But
He's your filter.
he's my everything and my filter. Yes.
Yeah. You know, you were called in this article in the Classical Singer a singer's composer. You're married to a singer.
I am.
Have you written anything for Kurt?
I have wanted to. I write mostly for opera singers. That's my gift. Is I write with a musical theater influence because I grew up loving musicals. That was my whole thing. So I had this musical theater influence and passion for it. But I really write for opera singers and for the opera stage. But I bring that sensibility with me. So Kurt has actually sung a couple of my songs. And yes, I do want to write for him, but we haven't had the opportunity to really do that. He's very busy with Beach Blanket Babylon, being one of the male performers in that.
Many characters, but King Louis is
King
the one
Louis.
that stands out.
Right. And we have a 15-year-old son who takes a lot of time and attention because we're just so proud of him. He's the center of our world.
So what's more work, writing an opera or raising a teenager?
I would say writing an opera is more work on every level because the raising the teenager is there's just so much joy, and he's such an extraordinary young man. He's so centered, and he reminds us both about what's really important in the world.
You know,
it's very grounding.
Yeah, we were talking before this. We're both the same age almost. Yeah. Did you ever think you'd be this out in any situation? I mean, when I was 15, the idea of being gay wasn't something I could language.
It was terrifying.
And certainly the idea of having two gay dads.
I mean,
what's it like for him?
Well, he's an extraordinary young man, and he's very proud of his family, you know, and he lives at his mom's and with us at least one night a week, sometimes more. But he's a really extraordinary young man in that he's grown up. This is his world, you know, and he's surrounded by love. And I think that's mostly what kids respond to. Are they loved or are they not loved, you know? And if they are loved and they feel safe and they know where they came from, you know, then they can thrive. And Grayson is extraordinary on that level, you know? He's just a really social, generous, big-hearted guy. I'm just so thrilled to be on the planet at the same time. But when I was growing up, when I was his age, 15, I grew up in Ohio, and we were talking earlier. I mean, it was just not acceptable. It was the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I knew I was gay. You know, I knew I was gay probably from like 8, 9, 10. I didn't know what to call it, but I had this sense, and certainly by my early teens.
And you were musical, and were you tortured? Were you teased?
I was musical.
You were musical, yeah. That's what mine was. David's he's musical.
He's very musical.
He's very musical, yeah.
I got called all the names, and I was tortured, and I tried to avoid it like the plague, and I was terrified. I grew up really terrified of being who I was, or people finding out, because I thought I don't feel like a bad person, but you know,
I'm
everyone
being told
says
I
that
am.
this is bad.
Yeah.
You know.
In our last few moments,
Yes.
talk to us about what's up next for you.
Well, we just opened my new opera, Moby Dick, last year, so that's moving around. Australia, it'll be here in 2012, the fall, at the San Francisco Opera.
Great.
It did so well. I'm so proud
So that'll
of the
be
piece.
its West Coast premiere.
No, the West Coast premiere will actually be in San Diego
I got it.
in early 2012.
Mm-hmm.
But then it will be up here in the Bay Area. But I'm working on expanding a new piece in Seattle for the Gay Men's Chorus there, which I haven't worked on a piece like that for a long time. I'm writing my first symphony. Wrote new songs for Joyce DiDonato that she's premiering at Carnegie Hall. Also for Nathan Gunn, which he's premiering in Dallas. And for the Houston Grand Opera, doing a set of songs to commemorate 9/11. And a big new piece for Joyce DiDonato with the Alexander String Quartet that will have its premiere on San Francisco Performances.
And you've got your new
a
CD
year from now. Yeah.
Passing By,
My
Jake
new CD.
Heggie, Dead Man Walking.
Yes.
Obviously.
And a new recording of that coming out featuring Joyce DiDonato.
Well, you know, we're all very proud of you. I don't
Thank
usually be
you.
that obvious on
Thank
the
you.
show, but it's been
Thank
interesting
you,
watching
Dave.
your development. And
It's
a
an
great joy.
unusual trajectory. I'm very grateful to have this life.
Give my best to Kurt.
I will.
We've been speaking with Jake Heggie. Next up, we'll be speaking with Jill Jacobs about the work of the Human Rights Campaign, the largest political action committee for the LGBT community in the United States. We'll be right back.